A strange infectious disease was raging in the Philippines, spreading rapidly and proving difficult to cure. Due to the overwhelming number of infected individuals, hospitals were starting to transfer patients to medical colleges. PJ, a student at the medical college, found himself dealing with one such patient. Just half an hour earlier, the person had been bitten on the calf, and the bleeding wound appeared relatively harmless. After PJ examined the patient, he initially thought that sterilization and anti-inflammatory treatment would be sufficient. Little did he know, the patient suddenly started convulsing, foaming at the mouth, and quickly became unresponsive despite resuscitation efforts. This scene reminded PJ of his mother, who had died from rabies many years ago, weighing heavily on his heart. PJ walked out of the ward dejectedly, and accidentally met her father, who had accidentally bumped into someone and sent them to the hospital. After a brief conversation between the two, they each went about their business. Suddenly, a terrifying change occurred. Dead patients are waking up bizarrely in the morgue and biting people on sight like maniacs. Even more horrifying was that those who were bitten quickly went mad and started biting others, resembling a scene straight out of a biohazard crisis. PJ's father, Mario, was almost bitten by a zombie, but luckily he was able to dodge it in time. However, others were not as fortunate, as they were caught off guard and turned into members of the zombie horde. The library is overrun by zombies, and even the basketball court rushes in with a bunch of zombies. Inside, there are strong gym students in class. After the initial panic, the gym students were able to defeat a few zombies with their strong physique. However, as more and more zombies surged in, one by one, they succumbed to the bites. Only PJ's boyfriend, Lucas, who was near the back door, managed to escape. By this point, the zombie horde had spread throughout the school. The young and inexperienced students were powerless against this terrifying event, and the campus echoed with the screams of both zombies and humans in agony. Meanwhile, the school principal and the student council president, Gilo, were in the control room discussing school affairs. They quickly noticed the chaos unfolding across the campus and realized that they could no longer control the situation. Gilo wanted to call his high-ranking military official father for help in mobilizing the army to the school. However, the principal intervened, fearing that a military force armed with guns would turn the medical college into a wasteland. At that moment, the principal focused on preserving his position and declared a state of emergency through the broadcast system, urging all faculty and students to take shelter indoors. Upon hearing the broadcast, a professor who had been discussing the cause of death of the bitten woman in his office immediately locked the door. However, a zombie slammed against it, and it was only with the help of PJ and others that they managed to keep the door closed. Unfortunately, the professor was bitten in the process. Simultaneously, Gilo, in his quest for survival, coincidentally encountered PJ's father, Mario. Both of them don't know each other's relationship with PJ, and in the process of fighting against the zombies side by side, they form a friendship. They also discovered that Zombie is afraid of water. As both were in a hurry to save PJ, they soon went their separate ways. The zombie virus outbreak had hit the medical college. Instead of fleeing for his life, Lucas recklessly ventured through the chaos and eventually found his trapped girlfriend. Suddenly the professor convulsed and rolled his eyes. Lucas knew that the professor was going to turn into a zombie after being bitten. He joined forces with the others to eliminate the infected professor. Outside the door, a group of teachers and students panicked and tried to escape. They ignored the advice to take shelter indoors and left the building. They managed to evade the zombie attacks and fled towards the school gate. However, upon reaching the gate, they discovered it was sealed off by a group of heavily armed soldiers. It turned out that news of the virus outbreak had already spread, and the military, fearing the virus's spread, had sent troops to quarantine the area. They looked at each other and didn't know what to do, but the zombies are coming from behind, so they have to run for their lives. Soldiers fired warning shots to no avail, and shot down all the zombies. Teachers and students who approached the school entrance. The news of the campus lockdown quickly spread through social media. Gilo, upon learning of it, urgently sought help from his father. His father arranged for a helicopter to pick him up, but the earliest it could arrive was 5 a.m. the next morning. The helicopter would land on the rooftop helipad of the school's main building, but it could only rescue 2 people. Vanessa overheard this information, despite Gilo's objections, and secretly released the news. At that moment, PJ and the others were discussing their escape plan when someone received the rescue helicopter's message. Their spirits lifted. Knowing they had a chance at survival, they were quite far from the main building and had to pass through 4 other structures, likely infested with zombies, but they had no other option but to push forward. They make their first stop at the student union building. and instead of hitting a zombie, they see Vanessa fall to her death. It turned out that Gillo, in a fit of anger after discovering the leak about the helicopter rescue, had pushed Vanessa. When PJ and the others found out, Gillo falsely claimed that Vanessa had already turned into a zombie. Not knowing the truth, they took Gillo with them to escape. The group made a frantic run to the second stop, the church, but found the main door locked. In desperation, they armed themselves and fought off the approaching zombies. While they managed to repel one wave, more zombies were on their way. When they were in despair, the door of the church was opened. It was Mario and Beth. Everyone rushed to hide in the church. PJ was extremely happy to reunite with his father, but his boyfriend stood awkwardly by his side. After all, not long ago, he were fighting zombies together with his prospective father-in-law. However, there was no time to dwell on it. With 4 hours left until the helicopter arrival, Beth led the group on a shortcut to the main building. They navigated the shadows of the night until they reached the entrance of a secure passage. Unexpectedly, the little girl who was traveling with them saw her mother, who had turned into a zombie, and ran towards her. The girl was overwhelmed by the zombies, and the others had no choice but to flee in panic. To make matters worse, Gillo, who had escaped on his own, locked the entrance to the passage. Because the helicopter couldn't save that many people, PJ and her group had no choice but to escape to the nearby student dormitory. Along the way, they encountered zombie attacks, and Mario got bitten while protecting PJ. Afterwards, Mario asked Beth to kill him so that he wouldn't turn into a zombie and hurt his daughter. PJ was devastated and vehemently disagreed. Beth couldn't bring herself to do it. Beth locks Mario in a room and leaves him to fend for himself before continuing his escape with the others. However, as they got closer to the main building, they encountered more and more zombies. It didn't take long for another member of their group to get bitten, although he valiantly stayed behind to hold off the zombies. They eventually caught up. This time, Beth stepped forward and engaged the zombies alone, giving the others a chance to escape. When they reached the final stop, the swimming pool at the main building, only PJ, Lucas, and Erica remained. Unfortunately, this area was swarming with zombies, and they had no choice but to jump into the pool to take cover. While the zombies were afraid of the water and couldn't jump in, they began to gather around the pool. Erica, realizing their dire situation, swam to the pool's edge to act as bait, sacrificing herself to distract the zombies and allow PJ and Lucas a chance to escape the encircling horde. After enduring many hardships and the sacrifices of loved ones, PJ and Lucas finally made it to the rooftop of the main building. However, a large number of zombies had been attracted to their location and were relentlessly pounding on the rooftop door. The situation became increasingly dire. Lucas has just sent PJ to a higher tarmac. Zombies have already broken through the iron door and rushed over. Lucas, in a desperate attempt to help PJ escape, lured the horde of zombies away by jumping from the rooftop. PJ was finally safe. PJ, alone and devastated, eventually decided to take her own life and jumped from the rooftop. But when PJ woke up the next day, she realized that she had only fallen to the rooftop below the tarmac and hadn't died in the fall. PJ, feeling disheartened, suddenly realized that it was already 6 in the morning, and the rescue helicopter hadn't shown up at all. What's more, despite the zombie bite marks on her body, she hadn't undergone any transformation overnight. PJ came to the conclusion that she might be carrying antibodies against the virus, possibly inherited, which could explain her resistance to the infection. She deduced that her father, who had also been bitten, might possess the same immunity. With this newfound hope, PJ's spirits lifted, and she grabbed a fire axe. Making her way back into the building, she activated the building's fire sprinkler system, drenching the entire structure and significantly reducing the zombies' combat capabilities. Next, she turned on all the emergency lights to draw the zombies' attention, utilizing her virus immunity. PJ fought her way through the zombies one by one. PJ fought her way to the room where her father was being held. Upon opening the door, she was relieved to find that her father had not turned into a zombie. The father and daughter reunited and were overjoyed to find hope for their escape. Remembering Beth's mention of an escape tunnel in the church, they decided to search for it. They did indeed discover the hidden tunnel and wasted no time entering it to make their escape. But then the zombies start coming and they speed up, only to be stopped by Gillo. It turns out that the helicopter didn't come, and Gillo, who was alone, hid and was finally bitten by a zombie. Gillo knows that he is about to be mutated, so he drags the others to die with him. After a fierce battle, PJ and her father managed to escape from the tunnel. They left Gillo behind, and he was soon overwhelmed by the approaching zombies. The father and daughter, having endured numerous hardships, finally escaped the school, only to discover that the outside world was in even worse shape. The zombie virus had already spread nationwide, explaining why the helicopter rescue hadn't arrived. At that moment, a broadcast announced that a super typhoon was set to hit in the coming days, and the heavy rain would likely help contain the spread of the zombie virus. But who knows what the future holds? Perhaps they would be rescued, or perhaps not.